During the pandemic and since, the NHS has tracked what have been described as excess deaths, higher numbers than usual of people dying for the time of year. COVID played a large part in that, of course. Those who died from the virus itself or from not coming forward for treatment during COVID restrictions. But according to research carried out for News at 10 and analysis of last winter's figures, there is something else, perhaps even more sinister, at play now: living without heating, or rather dying without it. Our findings suggest that by trying to keep their bills down, many people are risking their lives.
On frost-covered streets, 92-year-old Margaret moves with caution. But in these freezing temperatures, it's not the short walk from the shops on her mind, but the long day ahead in her Newcastle flat. And crucially, how to stay warm.
Sitting on my throne.
How often would you say you have the heating on in a normal day?
£3 worth.
£3 worth?
Yeah.
So you don't see it in terms of hours, you see it in terms of money?
I've got a monitor up there. When it gets to £1, I'll turn it off.
And when it gets to £3, that's it, no more?
1, 2, 3...
Instead, her blankets keep Margaret warm.
4. And that's how I stay warm, that's how I save on the heating.
Down the road, we join Amy.
So a lot of your work is kind of checking up on people, making sure they're okay?
Yeah. So when they've been discharged from hospital...
She visits elderly people, identified as most vulnerable in the cold weather.
Hello, I'm Dan, nice to meet you, how are you?
Jessie has asthma and a chronic lung condition.
On a daily basis, I find it very hard. I only put the heating on if I'm really cold. So I need the heating, but I can't always afford to put it on. I'm frightened.
Are you noticing people's health deteriorate because of this?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of the people that I'm supporting on discharge from hospital are presenting with problems like pneumonia, chest infections, and I'm certainly seeing a rise in that in the last few months.
Do you think that is because they're living in cold homes, that they're not making the heating on?
Yeah, I really do.
Almost 7,500 people die as a result of living in cold homes in the UK each year. Latest figures from last winter show on average 45 people died every day in England and Wales, but that was before energy bills doubled in 2022. An analysis for ITV News of excess deaths in England last month show over 1,000 people died because of cold homes, already up 36% on the previous December.
Hi Nigel, how are you?
Oh, fine, thank you.
Jonathan fears his elderly uncle was very close to adding to that number.
That's right. The 1 meal a day is sufficient.
The weakness of Nigel's voice, a result of the hypothermia he contracted at his home near Bristol during last month's cold snap. The 76-year-old had stopped heating his house, fearful of the cost.
If the Meals on Wheels people hadn't been there, coming in every day, then he would have just died. When the ambulance arrived, they checked the temperature. There was actually a thermometer in the house. It was 10 degrees. But then what's really hit him now is the energy costs being so high. And now he's just terrified about energy costs. He just says there's no money, and obviously he's now almost died because he didn't have any heating.
Nigel spent 3 weeks in hospital. A once fit, healthy man, he's now in care. His family fear he'll never return home.
It's definitely changed his life in terms of his mental and physical state.
How does he sound now compared to before?
He sounds like he's lost his spirit. I mean, he sounded very flat.
In Westminster today, pensioners held a 1-minute silence to remember those who died living in a cold home, calling on the government to do more. Health campaigners are urging the same.
I would just encourage the government to see this as a health issue, because if people are turning down their heating because they can't afford it or they fear they can't afford it, that will have health consequences. And I think this also highlights the fact that the cost of living crisis is driving illness.
The cold snap will pass, but high energy prices are here for some time yet. The question is whether help will be there for those that need it.
And Daniel, it's worth saying there is support available to those struggling with bills, the energy price guarantee, the energy bill support scheme, but it's clear that people are absolutely terrified by this.
And there are two things going on here, Julie. There's the energy crisis, and then there's the long-term problem with our housing stock. Yes, the government has helped every household and has helped the most vulnerable even more. But the most vulnerable, the elderly, those with health conditions, need the heating on a lot more. The advice today from the UK Health and Scientific Agency says that anything below 18 degrees for vulnerable people in their home, and they start to become ill, as that temperature falls, they become seriously ill. And in April, we know bills are going to go up even more. There is the question long-term here with that support of what happens, because experts say that energy bills aren't going to return to normal until maybe even 2030. There is this second issue of Britain's housing stock. It is amongst the oldest in Europe. That means it's incredibly energy inefficient. When people put heating on, that simply doesn't work for them. And excess deaths in this area were happening before this energy crisis. They will continue, campaigners say, until the housing stock is properly dealt with.
Yeah, it's a real combination of pressures, isn't it, Daniel? Thank you, as ever, for that.